If you compare beer with bratwurst,
and cheese with wine,
or even whiskey
with donuts,
then we think you can pair all of these delicious drinks with
murder,
conspiracies,
missing persons,
and more.
Drink with us as you feed your craving for true crime and creepy stories. On November 15th, 1959, National Airlines Flight 967 departed an airport in Miami at 10:22 p.m. At 11 p.m., that plane landed in Tampa, Florida, and shortly after took flight again, this time destined for New Orleans. At 12:44 a.m., now in the early hours of November 16th, Flight 967 made its last radio contact. Captain Frank E. Todd reported that the flight had been smooth despite limited visibility due to an overcast sky and some fog. The aircraft was last picked up on radar at a military station in Louisiana at 12:46 a.m., and at that time, the plane was flying over the open ocean. At 1:16 a.m., Air Traffic Control and New Orleans Approach Control attempted to contact Flight 967, but received no response. At some point in the previous 30 minutes, the plane had crashed into the icy, shark-infested waters of what was then called the Gulf of Mexico. All 42 passengers on board were presumed dead, including one Dr. Robert Spears. Spears' young wife, Frances, now seemingly widowed, would be left to raise their two young children on her own. Then, on January 7th, 1960, Frances Spears heard a knock at her front door, and upon answering, recognized the man standing on her doorstep as her late husband's friend, Dr. William Turska. Dr. Turska handed Frances a sealed letter. Inside, written on stationery from the Lakewood Motel in Dallas, was a message from her husband, in his handwriting, stating that he wanted to see her. Despite believing this to be some sort of cruel joke, Frances agreed to go with Dr. Turska. Adding to the bizarreness of her current situation, before sitting herself in the front, she noticed a box in the back seat of Turska's vehicle, labeled with the words, "Explosives." The pair made the drive to the hotel, where Frances was led to room 26. When the door opened, it opened not only to a very alive Dr. Spears, a man who quite possibly is one of the most accomplished con men in American history, but it opened an entire can of worms, begging the questions. Could Dr. Spears have known that the plane was going to crash, and that's why he never boarded? And if he didn't board the plane using his ticket, then who did?
Holy cow. That is quite an introduction. I have so many questions. I will hold them back because I'm sure you're going to answer a lot
Or
of
maybe
those.
I won't answer.
You might not.
Depending on what the question is.
Yeah, you might not. You know, I based that off of just when I asked you, hey, what are we recording? Like, what tidbits can you give me so I can pick out something to drink while we go through the tale?
And basically...
You gave me I knew I was off to a bad start when you said, I don't know. Those words, I was like, oh, man. This one's going to be a complicated one.
Yeah, because there's no centralized location.
Yeah, and then he went into like, well, there's not really a centralized location, and then so we have this element, and this element, and they were all just kind of strange. Con man, it's a mystery. He's a pilot. Plane crash, like, and I just had no idea what to do with it.
Well, early on, I'm going to clarify. He wasn't the pilot of the plane.
He wasn't. Okay.
No. You mentioned wanting to find something called pilot.
From what you...
No, he would have been a passenger.
Okay. From what you said on the intro, I understood he was not the pilot, but I could have sworn at some point you said he was.
No, I mean, he would have attempted it, I'm sure, given the opportunity without any training. He would have been like, who needs a pilot? I'm a pilot. And you'll see why I say that once we get into the story.
I mean, just from the intro alone, it sounds like a guy that
he was
would
mysterious.
Just be like, yes, I am a pilot and a doctor and he was professor as well.
Lots of things.
Okay, so we'll quickly get past the pairing part here. We
happened to go to a fundraiser.
We happened to go to a fundraiser
for a local Catholic school.
The choice in our drink is just mystery. And we happen to have a circumstance happen this weekend where we ended up with a mystery
bottle of wine.
So we thought it would be appropriate for this occasion. We happened to be invited to a fundraiser, and in this fundraiser there was a chance to purchase bottles of wine, and you paid $30, and it was a raffle, or it was a what would you call that? Like it was kind of like a random number would be
randomized. I would say you spun a wheel for a number, but it was on a cell phone. It was all digital, and it fed out a number, and then you got that numbered bottle of wine. Yeah,
and that number of bottle of wine that you got could range from you spent $30 for the ticket, so the bottle of wine could range from like I think it was $20 all the way up to
$70.
$70. Okay, I was going to say I know it was getting up there towards $100. I don't think it was quite there, but either way, you're getting a good bottle of wine.
So we bought two, and this was the bottle we won that was $27. So we actually overpaid by $3.
Yes.
But when you sign up for a mystery, you can be picky.
But let me say this, is that, we don't generally buy bottles of wine that are even close to $30.
And it went to a good cause. It was our way to contribute to this fundraiser.
Yeah. And in my research and from what which is very limited, but from what I've learned about wine, like you really don't have to spend that much money to get a good bottle of wine, good tasting wine. And I, from what I've also learned, Colorado prices are a bit higher than other states when it comes to wine, especially like California. Obviously, you have so many vineyards there.
Yeah.
Those bottles. So this, I'm not sure if this is $27 Colorado price wine or is it $27 in
what's
California.
It called?
You're just waiting for that one because you are just.
What's it called?
You want to hear me botch this name as much as possible.
Yeah.
All right. This is called Du Nipoti. I don't think that's
just
how
rolls off his tongue.
This is supposed to be said. Du Nipoti.
And it's a what kind of wine?
It is a Cabernet Sauvignon, called. And it's D-U-E, and Nipoti, kind of how you would expect that to be, N-I-P-O-T-I. But yeah, from Arizona, Toscana, is that Arizona?
Well, Tuscany is in Europe, isn't it?
I don't know, actually.
Tuscany is a region in central Italy. Thank you. I knew Italy, and then you said something, and I was like, wait, wow, my brain is telling me that I know where it is, but you are so confident.
I don't know. For some reason, I just went to Arizona for Tuscan. I think Tuscan architecture is more of like a deserty type architecture, so I go to Arizona. I think. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, I've already spent more time than I planned for the pairing part. We're going to get to the story, but first we're going to pour ourselves. There we go. We're going to pour ourselves a couple glasses of wine to drink while my beautiful wife. Wow.
That's okay. I said there was a box with words, and it was one word. So I just can't wait for the people online to tear that one apart.
That'll be fun.
Explosives. Maybe it was written multiple times.
I'm handing my beautiful wife a glass of wine. Her name is Katie. My name is Jason. We are the hosts of Perfectly Paired With, where we pair a drink with a fun story that my wife tells me. Because we'd be doing this regardless of it being recorded or not.
Well, the wine is good. It's very robust, full-bodied. I taste like cherry and wood.
Oh, yeah.
And a mystery bottle of wine is perfectly paired with a story that, although not technically open in terms of the FBI, remains, I think, a mystery in many people's mind today.
So the FBI does not consider this an open case?
Nope. They have their conclusions.
Are we going to get to hear their conclusions?
Yes.
Okay.
So Robert Vernon Spears was born on June 24th, 1894 in Springfield, Missouri, and from an early age, he was raised to be a man of mystery.
When was he born? Sorry.
1894.
1894. So we're talking early 1900s.
Yes. His mother, Matilda, would utilize various identities for herself, even using aliases for her children on official documents and in daily life.
His mom did that?
For example, for a time as a child, Robert Spears lived under the identity of Clyde Springer. Now, Spears' first encounter with the law occurred in 1913 when he was arrested for cashing a forged check. Then from 1818 to 1819, Spears enlisted in the military. After receiving an honorable discharge in 1919, Spears made his first living as a vaudeville-style escape artist who went by the name of Lieutenant Zorro, the Handcuff King. In March 1919, Spears, or then Lieutenant Zorro, convinced a young woman, one Ora Clayton, to sell her business so that the couple could be together. Within a week of the sale, he and she were married.
I have to interrupt you for just a second, so that I get this out, permanently on record. That should be a T-shirt of ours, Lieutenant Zorro.
The Handcuff King?
The Handcuff King. That is amazing.
I like that it's a vaudeville style, so there's a lot of and then he's handcuffed, and then he's and then he's not. And everything he carries is in a trunk that he drags behind
100%,
him.
100%. Also, crazy beginning, and I feel like you're just going to gloss over it. We're not going to really talk much about it, so I will say that is an upbringing to become a con artist.
100%.
Like
he was born and raised.
You have no choice but to utilize some of these tools that your mother has given you.
And he does. Now, I'm hopeful that the young couple shared one day of wedded bliss because on the second day of their union, Spears stole his wife's watch and a stash of money and fled.
Perfect.
Spears.
That's how this short story should go.
Now, Spears would be arrested for abandoning his wife, but the consequences could not have been too extreme.
Hold on.
I know.
What?
Our jails would be overrun today if people could be arrested for abandoning their wives.
Wow. I didn't know that was a thing. Okay.
Yeah, but apparently the consequences weren't that much because in 1920, Spears was living in Oakland, California, and he had already moved on to another wife. Now, Dorothy Hayes was the daughter of Spears's Swedish landlords, and the couple, after meeting, were soon married. In California, Spears worked as a salesman for the Merchant Calculating Machine Company, and he was relatively successful in that role. Dorothy was probably pretty surprised then to get a call from Robert 1 year into their marriage saying that he had been arrested and needed $750 in bail money.
That's a lot.
That is the equivalent to just over $11,000 today.
It's a hefty crime.
Now, what he was arrested for, I don't know, but the charges were ultimately dropped. And instead of returning the $750 to his wife's family, who were the ones who had pulled the funds together in the first place, he simply spent it.
Of course.
Eventually, Dorothy would leave Spears once it became clear that the grand tales he had told her about his family's status and their wealth were nothing but lies.
What is that called? Like,
apparently, he told her things.
They got
the
drop or something. Like when you find out, like everything you're saying is
he
not
had been
true.
Catfished in 1920s.
No, she
had been catfished.
He was catfishing her.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's
just lied about who he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. He hoodwinked her.
Oh, poor. What's her name?
Dorothy.
Now,
by 1926, Spears has cultivated a new identity for himself, Oscar Laudemio. Using this alias, Spears had acquired quite the team of young ladies whom he would use to swindle money from wealthy men whom Spears legitimately referred to as his marks.
Well, your reference to his next target is definitely accurate in the way he thought of him.
Well, and when he was arrested, he was entertaining two of his lady friends in a hotel room at the same time. So,
you dog, Spears. Or I'm sorry, Laudemio. Is he kind of Spanish looking?
No.
Like, could he pull?
No.
He picked the name that doesn't match the way he's super white.
I'd love to ask him where he got the name from. Yeah, he's very Midwestern. Now, in 1928, Spears was arrested again for check fraud and was sentenced to serve time in the Missouri State Penitentiary. It was here that Spears met a very consequential person, William Allen Taylor, who went by Al. Al was serving time for embezzling a small fortune from his employers. Like Spears, he too abandoned his wife. He also just happened to abandon a young child as well, his son, who would have been 5 at the time.
Stand up, guys.
Once released from prison, the pair, Al Taylor and Robert Spears, spent the next decade roaming the United States, scheming and conning their way. Now, they were not always successful with their cons. The pair, at various points in time, spent time incarcerated in places like Ohio, Florida, and Washington, D.C. But after a stint in the Maryland State Penitentiary, it was Al who decided that it was time for them to go straight, which means to start living an honest life.
Does Al become a doctor?
Al does not. He actually moves to Tampa, Florida, and he sells tires.
I was curious if Al was our
Dr.
letter
Triska.
handing
No.
gentleman.
Mm-mm. Now, Spears, without his partner in crime, decides to move to Minnesota, and there he begins writing for a religious magazine.
Spears?
Yes.
Really? All right. That's probably one of the easiest places you can con.
Yes, those sweet religious people.
Yeah, they'll fall for a lot of stuff.
It was there that he would become engaged to a woman named Benita Foster. However, 1 week before the pair was to be married, Spears got a case of cold feet and spent $15 to join a ride share to California.
Sounds like he is trying to live it a little up and up. He's like,
I'm not going to steal her money.
I'm not going to steal her money. I know if I marry her, I will ruin her life. I might as well hitch it over to Cali.
Yes. Now, as the ride share crossed Oklahoma, Spears noticed that his money was gone. Assuming it had been stolen by one of the 3 other individuals in the rideshare, Spears decided that he was going to get his money back. So at the point of his revolver, Spears forced his rideshare companions into a cornfield where he searched them. When he didn't find his stolen funds, he led the men back to the car with the intention of taking them to a police station. Now, taken from a book entitled Self-Styled, Chasing Dr. Robert Vernon Spears, written by author Alan C. Logan, the rest of this part of the story goes like this. Spears placed a chloroform-soaked blanket on top of his rideshare companions so that they would sleep in the back of the car all the way to the police station.
It's a lot of chloroform.
I know, but he has his vaudeville trunk, I'm sure.
Also, where did he get that amount?
Just wait. You have to just wait.
They're on their way across the country. It's just like...
But...
Do you have tanks of chloroform?
Just wait. That's why I shouted out this book that this story comes from, because I'm not taking credit. But at some point, they woke up and there was a fight for Spears's revolver. This skirmish caused Spears to lose control of the vehicle, which then crashed into a row of parked cars. And in the course of the commotion, the gun went off 3 times. One bullet grazing the head of one person, another bullet going through someone's chest. Neither of those individuals died. At that point, a crowd of townspeople had flocked to the scene. And as they chased a fleeing Spears, so as to hold him accountable, Spears pulled a tear gas gun from his coat and shot it into the crowd. A crowd, by the way, which even included the mayor of the town. That's what he said happened. So you want to know where he got the chloroform?
Dude,
I want to know where he got the tear gas.
Dude has some connections across the country.
He literally is a magician.
Like, look, I know this person in this area has this amount of chloroform. Also, I guess the whole blanket didn't have to be like saturated in it. It could have been, he made them lay down, put the blanket on them, and then put a tiny part on each of like where their head was.
I don't know.
But that is still wild. I've never heard anything like that.
Now, Spears was caught.
The whole thing.
It's all bizarre.
The tear gas gun, too? That is...
Read the book. That's what he says.
I don't think that part of our society has changed, that it's hard or very seldom do you even meet anyone outside of law enforcement that has a tear gas gun.
Listen, by the end of the story, I'm not going to put anything past Dr. Spears. He probably had a tear gas gun in one pocket, and then on his back was a parachute. And
I got to say, so far, he is my favorite character in all your stories so far.
Well, Spears was caught, charged, and in the end, agreed to a plea deal for that entire fiasco. Spears was sentenced to 4 years for armed robbery. After serving 2 years at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, he headed to Dallas, where he decided that he would pursue medicine. Now, for regular people, that would mean applying for medical school in order to obtain a degree and then getting your license.
Right.
But for Spears, that meant using a forged degree to get a Texas license and then simply attending enough medical conferences that he was confident in his abilities.
Wow.
By 1950,
that's cutting through red tape right there.
By 1950, not a real doctor, Dr. Spears had a relatively successful practice that focused more on naturopathic approaches to medicine, which allowed him to treat patients with natural means.
Also, he won't kill
anybody.
Instead
of surgery or other invasive methods that would require actual knowledge and training.
Yeah. Smart man.
Dr. Spears was so convincing in this profession that he was elected president of the Texas Association of Naturopathic Physicians and secretary of the National Association.
Holy Could you imagine being him, just like, I am bullshitting all of this, and how am I doing so well?
Fake it till you make it. That is Dr. Spears. Now, through his naturopathic endeavors, Dr. Spears began studying hypnosis.
Oh, gosh.
In December of 1950, Spears married again, this time to a woman named Frances Massey. Dr. Spears's practice led him to eventually offering an at-home visiting service where he would perform abortions, which were illegal at the time. Spears even developed a formula for a paste, which he called gook, for performing abortions non-surgically.
What?
Yes. In 1958, Spears was arrested and charged with performing these illegal abortions. It was after that point that Dr. Spears...
Was gook not working? Is that like women were going to the government and saying...
I think gook came about sort of as an alternative to him performing abortions, because after he was arrested, he stopped performing the abortions and then simply tried to sell this formula.
Because abortions are illegal at this time.
Correct.
So patients of his are already entering into I'm doing something illegal, the doctor's doing something illegal, so I'm not going to tell anybody.
Yeah.
Did he have, like,
I'm assuming maybe something happened and then he was charged.
Had to have. And you didn't see like any...
No, I read
stories
nearly
on
800 pages of FBI reports, and none of them addressed what specifically brought charges against him in terms of the abortions.
That's crazy.
I can tell you,
because if he could successfully do an abortion, like that's actually like the perfect place for
a naturopathic, non-licensed
a con doctor to be in, if he could actually do it at that time, because like I said, it's illegal, and you've got confidentiality everywhere with that unless you fuck it up.
Yes. Well, it was after sort of being arrested that Dr. Spears veered his focus away from performing illegal abortions to simply selling his gook.
Okay, so
to other individuals who would perform the abortion.
You mentioned the gook is kind of after he got in trouble.
I think he probably had been developing. It's like a paste that he intended to use, and then when he got charged.
So it's a paste they kind of rub on their stomach.
I have no idea where they put the paste. I didn't want to ask, but that's what kind of led him to traveling a lot, because he would try to sell his gook to these doctors as opposed to performing them in a local area.
That's wild. Okay. Now, that is crazy.
Yes. By the time Frances Spears was pregnant with their second child, Dr. Spears had formed a business relationship with a man named Donald Loomis, who previously was like a fitness trainer to the Hollywood stars, who then transitioned into performing illegal abortions in California, like you do, I'm sure. Train a celebrity, perform an abortion. This business relationship played a role in the Spears family decision to move from Texas to San Pedro, California.
But we do need to remember the celebrities back then it wasn't like now.
I know, but if you look up a picture of
Hollywood
him
stars
and
were barely making any money,
yeah.
And so he maybe needed a second job.
Maybe. In September 1959, Dr. Spears visited Beacon Mortgage Company in Dallas. He stated that he was interested in refinancing his property at 6116 Gaston Avenue to secure a cash loan so that his family could purchase a property in California. The Spears' Texas property, the one he was trying to refinance, had been rented to a female tenant named Mrs. Long Henry. I swear she's real, because he's later going to sue her for stealing furniture. Anyway.
Long Henry.
So Mr. Alexander, who was the president of the mortgage company, visited the Spears property to evaluate it, right? To refinance it.
I almost can't even hear anything you're saying, because I'm so on this Long Henry. Because there's also Long Bottoms.
No,
and it's like two brothers decided to change their last names. They were like, screw this family, screw our father. We're going to come up with different last names. And they wanted to play a joke on their awful father who had, diddled them or whatever it was, and said, I'm going to be Long Bottoms. And they laughed. And they were like, oh, that's so funny. Long Bottoms. It's like a long butt. Yeah. And then the other brother was like, I'm going to be Long Henry. And they all laugh, and they all know, Henry's, the other side of the human body. Yeah. So they got it. They got the joke on Dad. And now we have, Long Bottoms. Apparently, Long Bottoms probably, had more kids than Long Henry, because I have never heard Long Henry.
Well, she was renting the property that Dr. Spears wanted to refinance so he could get a loan to buy some land or a home in California. So Mr. Alexander, the president of the mortgage company, had to visit the property to evaluate it, right, to determine how much it's worth. When he arrived, he noticed that there were 2 heavy padlocks on the garage door and the door to a garage apartment, meaning that he could not gain access to those parts of the home.
This is an appraiser?
Yeah. An unknown female living on the property, possibly Mrs. Long Henry, told Mr. Alexander that Dr. Spears had used the garage apartment as a laboratory, and it still housed expensive medical equipment, which was why he could not get into that part of the property. But this information, which was included in the FBI files, lends me to believe that possibly the FBI wasn't convinced that that was what was behind the padlocks, and maybe it was a place where other explosive materials had been produced.
Well, I missed something. Where's the explosive material?
We don't know. We don't actually.
On
Well, the plane exploded or possibly exploded. And so the FBI pursues, at least per their files, this thinking that maybe he was creating these things in the garage, in the apartment in the garage, which is why Mr. Alexander couldn't get into that part of the property.
Gotcha. And Mr. Alexander just put this in his appraisal report.
I'm sure he was interviewed, and this is
FBI
the information he's giving.
Looks at it later.
Yep.
This is no red flags at this time.
No. Now, by mid-October, apparently, Mr. Alexander got into those parts of the home because the refinance was approved. Shortly after hearing the news, Dr. Spears again visited Beacon Mortgage to ask about adding mortgage insurance to the refinance loan. This insurance would pay out to cover the refinanced mortgage amount in the instance that Dr. Spears were to die unexpectedly.
Ooh.
But since Spears was over the age of 60, Beacon Mortgage would not offer him that insurance option. Now
he's over 60
so old,
at this
and
time?
his wife is so young. Yeah.
And he's still just playing the young man's game?
Yep.
Wow.
Now, the $16,500 loan, which came from the refinancing, was dispersed to Spears on October 26, 1959. Now, at the end of that meeting, Mr. Alexander mentioned that he was leaving for Topeka, Kansas, to which Spears replied, "You really should be careful because there have been so many airplane crashes lately."
Dun, dun, dun.
Now, despite not getting mortgage insurance, Dr. Spears did successfully acquire several insurance policies on his life, including a $100,000 policy in September of that year, plus another $20,000 insurance policy and a $1,000 policy for accidental death. Now, the whole Spears family returned to the Texas property on November 8th. In 1959, after their tenant, Mrs. Longhenry, abandoned her lease and moved out. Now, before I continue, we need to go back in time to when Dr. Spears first moved to Texas and address what became of his friendship with Al Taylor. Since moving to Texas and starting his work as a naturopathic doctor, Dr. Spears had reconnected with Al Taylor. During that time, Taylor lived in Florida. He sold tires. He had been married to a woman named Alice, but that marriage had ended in divorce prior to the plane crashing in November of 1959.
How did they reconnect?
I have no idea.
Huh.
But they did. Now, as to the specific nature of their friendship, we can assume there was an element of the old scheming and conning. By the end of their friendship, Dr. Spears would have told Al that when they corresponded, he shouldn't use his real name, and instead he should go by the handle F. Foxtrot Massey, which was his wife's maiden name, which makes me just question a lot of things.
Foxtrot or Massey?
Massey. Her name was Frances Massey.
F. Foxtrot Massey.
Now, what was also interesting is that the FBI files regarding the National Airlines Flight 967 focused numerous pages on documenting Dr. Spears going out to eat with unidentified women and other unidentified males, creating this picture that perhaps Dr. Spears had a whole different life when he was, quote unquote, traveling for work. And this life definitely included Al Taylor. And in a letter sent to Dr. Spears from Al in early November of 59, just prior to this flight crashing, Al wrote, quote, "Your letter received yesterday, and please let me know definitively when you will be here, where, and what time. I went to airport Tuesday night at 9, and plane was late. So waited until 10:30, and of course you didn't show. Called Dr. Lane and left your message. Blaine is getting ready to take off for New Orleans. Then Caramel. Looks like I'm stuck again, and if he was alone, I'd do something about it. But I can't afford to have his wife and baby on my conscience. Have to get on the ball, so we'll look for your letter on arrival, etc. End quote. What is going on?
I have absolutely no idea, but I do know I want to start texting in that manner.
I'm like, what message to what doctor? Who is Blaine? You're lucky you're still alive. Had you not had a wife and baby, Al would have taken care of you.
Also, I didn't know Blaine was a real name for people. We have a friend that we got
pseudonym.
We got a group chat, and her name is Blair, and somebody misspelled her name, or I was autocorrected to Blaine, and now we call her Blaine.
Yes,
like she is rarely called Blair.
Yes,
and I thought Blaine was a completely made up name. I didn't even think it was a thing. So if it was autocorrected, maybe it actually.
I'm assuming it's a real
name. It must
name.
be a name.
And Blaine is very lucky.
Blaine. I feel like there's someone in a movie named that.
I don't know. Anyway, in mid-November, it was actually Al Taylor who Dr. Spears claimed he was intending to visit when he flew to Florida for what should have been his final time if he were to have been the one who died on the flight back.
Sure.
Dr. Spears told his wife he needed to collect money from Taylor and that he was meeting with a new doctor there in the hopes of selling this doctor his abortion gook. Originally, Spears had purchased a ticket for Delta Flight number 968 from Dallas to Tampa, which was scheduled to leave on the 12th at 4:30 p.m. But when the flight was significantly delayed, Spears canceled that reservation. Spears then purchased a round-trip ticket from Evelyn Stomber, who was ticket agent number 101, for a total of $116.93. Which Francis, his wife, would talk later with the FBI that was very strange. He was very much like a living out of his pocket kind of guy. He would have bought the ticket there and then waited and then paid for a return flight. Now, a cab driver named M.E. Murphy picked Dr. Spears up from his home at 5:12 a.m. and dropped him off at Love Field Airport. When later interviewed by the FBI, Frances Spears said she did not see her husband pack any bags before leaving for his flight, nor did she watch him leave in the morning to see how much luggage was taken with him. The cab driver, however, recalled Dr. Spears taking 3 to 4 pieces of luggage with him, which would have been an unusual amount for a 3-day business trip. While in Florida, Dr. Spears spoke to his wife by telephone on November 14th. He also wrote his wife 3 different letters, one on the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th, despite the fact that he should have returned home before any of the letters actually made their way to his wife. Also, while in Florida, Al's son, do you remember the one he abandoned, who went by the name Junior, witnessed his dad and Dr. Spears enjoying an expensive dinner together. During the meal, Al flashed $600, which struck his son as very unusual because Al was in significant debt and didn't have those types of funds. Al's financial situation had gotten so severe that he even recently mentioned that he was going to take a trip to Atlanta in search of a job. Then, on the night of the 15th, Flight 967 took off from Tampa, Florida, and someone using the ticket bought by Dr. Spears was on board that flight. Now, in terms of the plane crash itself, there was one witness who was stationed in a lookout tower 30 miles west of where Flight 967 crashed into the ocean. This witness reported seeing an unusual light in the sky in the general direction of where the flight had been lost. According to this one person, there was a red or dark red light that appeared suddenly, lasted for a couple of seconds, and then they reported seeing a vertical white light that flashed and then fell downward with a white tail. In terms of size, this individual claimed the flash was as big as the sun. Only 9 bodies were recovered from the water, along with a portion of a 10th. All the remains showed signs of traumatic injuries. The coroner determined that the passengers were not exposed to fire while still alive because their carboxyl hemoglobin levels were too low. However, there were signs of burning after death, localized to the upper torso, which would have floated above the water, as though there was a flash burn on the water surface. Investigators associated with the Air Force believed that the flight had exploded midair, but the Coast Guard wasn't so sure. The Coast Guard really believed that the aircraft broke apart as it hit the water. But it was determined that weather could not account for why the airplane fell out of the sky. Now, Mrs. Spears was notified sometime during the day of the 16th that her husband had died on this plane crash, and her behavior, as reported by family and friends, was consistent with a woman who had surprisingly just lost her husband. Now, shortly after Flight 967 crashed, Alice, Al Taylor's ex-wife, became concerned about his whereabouts. Both he and his salmon pink Plymouth were nowhere to be found. Al had mentioned going to Atlanta in search of a job, but when Alice couldn't even contact him at all, she became quite alarmed. So alarmed that despite being recently divorced, she decided to go through his things. And
so Al is not reporting to anybody that he's supposed to be going anywhere.
No, and I'm sure she's trying to reach out, get a hold of him. And
is he reconnected with his kid? He's part of their life?
He went to dinner with him and...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, why is she so concerned about him?
Well, there are lots of questions. We can discuss it in a minute. But she's convinced that something has happened to him. Just hang on to it, okay? So she decided that she was going to look through his things, even forcing somebody to open up a lockbox that he had. And in this lockbox, she found something rather curious. Apparently, Al Taylor had purchased an insurance policy for himself. On the night of the 15th, Al put $1.50 into an insurance vending machine at the airport.
An insurance vending machine?
Yes. And bought a policy worth $37,500.
What the hell is an insurance vending machine?
I even saw a picture of it. It's hilarious. Now, when Alice tried to...
And it's good.
Well,
it's upstanding.
Let's just keep going. I need you to... We're going to decompress all of it, but I have to keep going.
I'm just... All I can think of is when you see a movie or documentary about I don't know, Japan.
No.
And you see these crazy vending machines. One of them is a insurance vending machine.
When Alice tried to claim on the insurance policy, it would leave the whole country asking whose husband actually died on board Flight 967, Dr. Spears or his friend Al Taylor. And when I say the entire country, it was legitimately this scandal where there were newspaper articles written, and anyone who had issued any insurance policy to either man was invested in knowing the answer to that question.
Right.
But that question would prove relatively hard to answer.
But he's not, Al's not actually connected with the flight, right? He's just goes missing around the same time.
Yes. Now, there were no policies at that time that required air travelers to prove their identity. And no one at the gate would recall whether it was Dr. Spears or Al Taylor who had boarded the plane. The only thing that anyone could remember being of note was a man in a brown suit with just a briefcase. No luggage, moving as though to board the plane. They couldn't even verify that this man actually got on board the plane. And
what a different time. Holy cow.
A theory soon developed which suggested that Dr. Spears had tricked his friend Al Taylor into boarding the flight with an explosive device without knowing it in order to, A, disappear from his life just before his trial regarding his illegal abortion charges, while B, still financially taking care of his family.
What exactly, what exact year are we in right now?
This is 1959.
That's Okay. For some reason, I was thinking it was earlier and couldn't really even imagine what like airports were like and planes were like at that time. But at this time, it's what I mean, it's not, we're not like far removed from
just in terms of
like.
visualizing it, though. People who used to travel on airplanes during this time period literally would dress up in their finest. It was like an experience.
Oh,
they would feed you delicious meals and drinks, and it was a whole thing.
Which explains the ticket price. Because when you said the ticket price, even though now it wouldn't have been crazy, but I'm thinking back then, and I'm like, that he's like spending over $1,000.
But let me tell you, in addition to what I think was all encompassed, when he went to buy that ticket, he made a big deal out of scheduling a limousine drive, almost like he was trying to get attention to the fact that he was going to be on this flight. And they even pointed out in the files that like limousines wouldn't pick up at houses. It was for like certain hotels to the airport. So he probably even paid for this limousine service that he didn't take advantage of. But it was almost like this show of, I'm buying a limousine to get me to this flight that I'm going to be on for sure because I'm buying a limousine. It seemed to be like a whole show. So it seemed like a significant price for a ticket, but if you take into account it's round trip plus a limousine pickup.
But you get the opposite outcome where he kind of wanted witnesses, all of that to corroborate the story.
But he did it on the wrong side. He did it on his flight to Florida as opposed from back. Everybody knew him to Florida. That wasn't the plane that crashed. Now, Al's former wife, Alice, went as far to say that she believed Dr. Spears had hypnotized her husband into boarding Flight 967 and hypnotized him to use an explosive device to crash the plane so that he could collect on all the insurance money.
Is there, outside of her word, is there anything that can corroborate
At some point, Dr. Spears actually works with her to get her husband declared dead. And she's the only one who gets to collect on her insurance policy, which makes me we're going to hang on.
So
just wait, because there are some things that we need to talk about first. So Dr. Spears.
The only reason I asked, those are some outlandish claims.
And here's some
hypnotism works so much, but he's not the GD CIA.
Okay.
You know?
Now, here's some things that make me question whether Al was even on the plane to begin with. So some thought it would have been impossible for Al Taylor to purchase his insurance policy when he did and make it in time for Flight 967 because apparently they like timestamped the tickets, right? Because you don't want somebody purchasing a policy afterwards. And the timestamp would have left him just 9 minutes to get to his flight.
Oh, interesting.
There were also sightings of Al after Flight 967 crashed. One sighting made by a close friend of Al who said, nope, I saw him alive. And if it was Al who boarded the flight, how did proof of this insurance policy that he bought 9 minutes before the flight took off magically wind up in a lockbox for his wife to find?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not getting the printed out or, geez, are they printing? They aren't printing things. The handwritten.
I don't know.
No, they are printing things.
I'm sure it's printed.
The Gutenberg press way back in the day. So they have the ability to
Lots
print
of
things,
people think that this insurance policy was another red herring, and Al, who was in debt and financial struggles, he wanted to disappear to Mexico. It was just a red herring. And Al...
Purposely? Do you think that, or is the theory that the wife was in on it?
I think both wives.
And...
But that's just me.
They were creating the red herrings.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Now, so let's just assume they don't suspect anything. They don't create any noise. Does that make things more complicated for them to get away with this or less?
I don't think there was a way not to. So we've had some airplane issues as of late in 2025, which got me looking into airplane crashes.
Oh, is this how you stumbled on this?
This is how I came about this story.
Wow.
And it was during this run that there were several like aeronautical disasters. Yeah. And so there's
what is it? 59?
1959. There's a part of me that thinks there was so much attention on this plane crashing that you had like news reporters out there just looking for anything. And the fact that both these women were claiming to have their husbands on this flight, I don't even know how they connected them as being like the one ticket. Like it was either him or him. Like that's what kind of blows my mind is where did they figure out?
Well, I mean, it's not like maybe unless the women don't know each other, right?
No, and you could buy tickets as unknown.
At the same time, if you stumbled across enough that like you were like, oh, these two guys were like she has a husband missing. And she's going through stuff, and it connects him with a guy that just died on this plane crash that made national news. That's kind of strange.
Yeah.
And then you start looking into the past, and or maybe Al was like very honest with her, like, hey, I used to be a con artist with this guy, and maybe she even recognized the name from the headlines and whatnot, and she was like, but Al's gone. His friend just died. And I know I should maybe give him a day or two to return. He's not returning.
Yeah.
I could see getting the connection somewhat quickly for that wife. The other one, I don't.
All right. Well,
I don't see like the other one. I think the other one's under a veil the whole time because you just got to assume that.
Can you hold that thought for 3 paragraphs real quick? Okay. Now, It was all those unanswered questions that kept Frances Spears from collecting any insurance money. And while Frances continued to live in their Dallas home with their 2 young children trying to survive without any insurance payout, her husband, Dr. Spears, was alive and well, living with his friend, William Turska, for months in Turska's Arizona desert bungalow. Right? Then in early January, we know that Dr. Spears and Dr. Turska spent time in several Texas hotels, each time using a different set of aliases for the pair. Frances Spears would stick to the story that she had no idea her husband had not boarded the flight. And it wasn't until early January that she was made aware of the fact that he was still alive. But
through the letter.
Yes, but some question that claim. Apparently, one newspaper reporter heard her say, quote, "What can I say? I told him it wouldn't work," end quote.
To what? What was she saying that to?
She was like in a house, I'm assuming holding some weird press conference, and she like went to the kitchen. She lit the one cigarette she was allowed to smoke to like process this entire situation, and some newspaper reporter overheard her like lament this to her kitchen sink or something.
Why did you say the one cigarette she's allowed to smoke?
I don't know.
She's chain smoking. Everybody is back then. Everybody.
Housewife.
Doctors are prescribing, especially to housewives.
Possibly Dr. Spears would have.
Yeah, prescribing the cigarettes to them. How weird is it for her to say that, though? I told him it wouldn't work. That's why I want to know the context.
So the FBI files go into some other thing.
How do you come about saying that? Like,
no,
what is she...
The FBI files go into some things about how, like, a check had been deposited by him with his signature after he had already died. And, like, there were other indicators that maybe she knew something had been planned and was afoot. So
that's one of my favorite words, afoot.
Yes.
Thank you, Sherlock Holmes.
Now, when Dr. Spears was finally discovered to having been alive, he was arrested. It was actually J. Edgar Hoover himself who announced to the country that the Dr. Robert Vernon Spears had been found.
What?
And the FBI was very anxious to hear what he had to say about Flight 967.
Wow. You had Hoover announcing this one.
Now, according to Dr. Spears, he had intended on flying home on the 15th, and Al was planning on driving his Plymouth to Texas. But since Al had had an injured neck, he was reluctant to make that long drive, so his good friend Dr. Spears offered...
How did he get an injured neck?
So...
This plane crash?
No, it was...
He got out of it?
No, it was a car accident, and the FBI files listed all these different situations where Al had been injured, I'm sure to collect money. Several different car accidents. There was even one where Al had tried shoes on at like a shoe store, and apparently there was a tack in a shoe and it cut his foot, which makes me think that was part of their like scamming and their conning. Right?
A tack in a shoe?
Yeah.
Weird. When you were doing research, did you ever or have the thoughts that maybe one of these men were on the flight and they parachuted out?
No.
Right before an explosion?
No, because I don't think they would have survived in that water during that like time period.
Oh, that was so okay.
Do you
very much trying not to interrupt you as much, but this is a question I had. The Gulf of America.
It literally was a thing. What are we going to call this body of water?
I know. The Gulf of America. You said it was icy waters. Does it get icy around that? Because that's around the equator.
Well, it's November.
But it's
so yes, I'm assuming
even so, it's around the equator. How?
In the middle of the night, we were in Florida in July, and nightfall. I wouldn't swim in that water.
Yeah, that's true. It did suck getting locked out of our Airbnb/hotel.
If I could remember the name, I would shame them hardcore right now. Now, so according to Dr. Spears, he offered Al his ticket on the flight so that Al wouldn't have to make the long drive in his Plymouth to Texas. And then Dr. Spears offered to drive Al's car. And as to the plane crash, Dr. Spears claimed he had no idea what could have happened to the flight. According to Dr. Spears, he did not send Al Taylor aboard with any dynamite or other explosives. And in terms of evidence, there was no evidence to suggest foul play on board the flight. So Dr. Spears was never charged with any crime associated with the plane crash.
Did they get plane wreckage?
A little bit. Dr. Spears was, however, charged with driving a stolen vehicle across state lines. He had driven Al's pink Plymouth beyond Texas, which is where the FBI claimed he was given permission to take it. So, after pleading guilty to that charge, Dr. Spears received a 5-year sentence, and that in addition to the 5 years he received for the illegal abortion charges, he was sentenced to serve 10 years in Alcatraz.
What?
Yes.
I do remember you mentioning Alcatraz to me as far as like things I could possibly pair it with. I totally forgot about it. Like, I'm thrown off by this now. This guy is everywhere.
Yes. Now, Dr. Spears did appeal the sentence.
Isn't there there's a song about, like, you can find me everywhere?
I've been everywhere, man.
Yeah.
I've been everywhere.
Yeah. And isn't it a Johnny Cash song?
I think so. Are we still recording? That screen is black.
I hope we are. Oh, gosh.
Oh, I swear on my life.
We are.
Okay, it's recording.
Right.
Now, Dr. Spears did appeal the sentence. He stated that he was forced to plead guilty to the stolen vehicle charge because the FBI made threats of charging his wife. And after a judge set aside the stolen vehicle conviction, upon his release, Dr. Spears moved back to Texas so he could be close to his ex-wife, who at that point had been remarried, but it allowed him to be close to their daughter. Unfortunately, his son had died while he was incarcerated.
Oh.
Now, despite both the FBI and the Aeronautics Board concluding that Flight 967 was an accident, questions about Dr. Spears's potential foul play role remain to this day. For example, when Dr. Spears was facing charges for performing illegal abortions, he sought advice from Julian Frank, an attorney in New York. This exact attorney would take out $900,000 in insurance policies and then board a flight with dynamite, which he used to blow up the plane as it flew over North Carolina.
What?
And Dr. Spears himself would give an interview during his incarceration in which he provided a different version of events. In that interview, he said that he wanted to scare a witness in his upcoming illegal abortion trial. So he asked Al to board Flight 967 with explosives, but they weren't meant to detonate while the plane was flying across the ocean.
Yeah, that's bullshit, because he'd just done all his life insurance policy polls, and yeah, there's too much leading up to it.
And he would recant that version later, claiming he made it all up.
All right. Well, there's part of me that really likes Spears.
To just live your life with zero regard for cultural norms.
No regrets.
Law of the land. He was like just keep going before O.J. Simpson was just keep going. Yeah. You're going to make it, my friend. Just keep going.
Or he was Nike before Nike.
Just do it.
Fascinating, man. And I wish we had more time to like dive into the nuances of who he was. He's kind of our somewhat modern day, give me a Wild Wild West outlaw. First one off the top.
Wild Bill Hickok.
Hickok's good. Wild Bill. It's a good one.
Doc Holliday.
Nah, he's not an outlaw.
Yes, he got charged several times with gambling, which also was illegal.
Yeah, with gambling, but he was also on the law side. He served the law, or as a lawman for a very long time.
No, he never was a lawman.
He was under White Herb.
Oh, no, Doc Holliday? Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's what Tombstone all is.
No, he's a friend. He was never a lawman.
No, okay, no. You're right. He was Tombstone isn't.
So Val Kilmer died, and we went on this binge, and we found Tombstone, which is the best Western ever. I would say it's in my top 5 favorite movies. And if I could be anybody else, I've said this several times, I want to be Doc Holliday.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't watched that until now, and I say sorry to Val Kilmer and sorry to everybody else. But anyone
circling back
anyway. Doc Holliday he served law for White Herb earlier.
He was a friend.
I'm pretty sure.
No, right, anyway. I just listened to a podcast.
There's several. My whole point is there is several Wild West outlaws that we know of. You know, like the wanted posters have them on, and if we spent a little more time or paused it for a second, we'd find exactly like, oh yeah, this guy. This guy is the closest.
Jesse James.
There we go. Good job. This guy is the closest to being a Jesse James of our time. You know, he lived in America, which. Now proven through him, I'm now looking at, and also looking at all the laws we have on every fucking thing now. It kind of like that was a little bit of a Wild West time of modern civilization, but he literally was a Wild West outlaw, just doing whatever the fuck he wanted. And
here's why I like this story, because it literally was this transitional period where not long before he was alive, people just did what they wanted to do. They made their own choices. They survived. And then you fast forward to like 1960, 1970, where culture dictated law and cultural norms and all these things that were foreign 50 years prior. And he lived in a transitional period where he decided to embrace the mentality of the Wild West as opposed to what civilization was becoming here in the United States.
Which might lend to what kind of just adds more and more like law and big government to everything is like one guy ruins it all for everyone else.
I like that nobody knows who he is.
That is a crazy thing. I have never heard of this guy. And you started telling me the story, and like as far as like tidbits from the story, nothing struck in my mind like, oh, I've heard of this. Like every now and most of the time actually, when you start saying, oh, this is what the story is, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I recognize that. Like I at least like saw a headline on it. Nothing on this guy. And he literally is damn, I want to say a name because he's even connected to Billy the Kid. There we go. He's like a Billy the Kid of our time. Like just went across doing whatever the fuck he wanted to do. And I should probably double check that. I don't know. Billy the Kid was an outlaw, right?
I don't think you have enough to differentiate between like Bill Hickok, Jesse James, Billy the Kid. They are all legitimate outlaws.
Billy the Kid was the one I was thinking of because he's, I think my family has a cabin up in Steamboat, and I think there's a little jailhouse, and Billy the Kid is connected there somehow. And I can't remember what it is. So he always sticks out in my mind. Anyway, also, I think Billy the Kid was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That's where I'm connecting him from. Anyway,
there's a whole
cool
world
guy.
out there
Amazing.
of human beings who lived their life the way they wanted to. And that's one thing I'm taking from this story is there are some people who make it in life because they follow the rules. There are some people who make it in life because they don't follow the rules.
Yeah.
And then there's Dr. Spears.
Yeah. Did he even care?
I don't.
Did he just want to get away with whatever he could get away with?
That's a great question. They think he didn't want to go to jail, and that was him faking his death. And he apparently had evolved enough that he wanted his wife and his 2 children financially taken care of.
Yeah. It's wild. Wild. Wild, wild, wild.
And in the end, maybe we will never know what happened to National Airlines Flight 967, or whether or not Al Taylor was aboard when the plane crashed into the ocean. We won't know what Dr. Spears had intended when he chose not to fly back to Texas, or if there was even an intended plan at all. We will never understand the full extent of Francis Spears' involvement or Alice Taylor's knowledge. We might never know if Dr. Spears played a role when another man chose to explode a different aircraft mid-flight so that the insurance money could be collected. The FBI eventually concluded that there wasn't evidence to connect Flight 967 to what might have been Dr. Spears' greatest con of all. But when I try to accept that version of the story, a quote by Mark Twain comes to mind. Twain once wrote, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled."